Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today on the channel we're discussing the pistol caliber carbine, or PDW, or subgun, or whatever you want to refer to, a small compact weapon system chambered in a pistol caliber cartridge as in the sense of a concept, because this is a concept that originally I had a lot of negative perceived notions about. And throughout that time of using this particular weapon platform and trying to develop some of my thought processes, I realized that maybe my mind has changed on the whole 9mm pistol caliber carbine situation. So those perceived issues were pretty straightforward in the beginning. First off, this thing comes out, why not a rifle? We know rifles are more capable, their cartridges are much more powerful, and you already now have an overt weapon system. So what's really the point, right? And I think that a lot of us feel the same way. We know pistol cartridges generally suck in comparison to rifle cartridges. So why even bother with this concept, and why should you have one of these in your inventory? And that's what we're going to talk about, because I have gotten to the point now where I do think it has a reasonable place for preparedness. Now, this is the Beretta PMXs, which was provided to the channel by Beretta, so I wanted to have full disclosure there. And I'm using this particular firearm as the concept evaluation platform. And it has been a very good gun for me, and I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons of this gun later on. And we're also going to talk about why my mind has changed in regards to why I think this is a good idea. So as soon as we get a word in from our sponsor, we'll go over all of that. This video is sponsored by Tacpack. Now, Tacpack is a monthly subscription service that's great for anybody who wants to stock up on spare parts or maybe try out new accessories they've never even thought of before. For example, we have a Mission First tactical pistol bag here from a Tacpack that's full of other items in a Tacpack. For example, backup iron sights, which I know you guys love to have. But we also have very useful spare parts, such as full-blown bolt carrier groups and charging handles, safeties, and end plates, which you can't go wrong with. Not to mention accessories that I'm really excited to try out, like this dye-free coat Tiger Claw, which I'm going to throw on my 10.5. But they also give you things like survival gear. For example, this monstrosity right here, I'm pretty sure could have defended Minas Tirith. So, if you're interested, Tacpack has two different main tiers. They have the standard and the plus. With the standard, it's $50 a month, and you get $90 to $120 worth of value in your package. But the plus is $129.95 a month. You get a value of $240 to $300 in every single package. So check out Tacpack.com. Of course, having extra parts on hand and getting additional accessories is never a bad idea, and this is a great way to do it. So thanks to Tacpack for supporting the channel, and now back to the video. All right, thanks to Tacpack for supporting the channel. Now let's talk about the pros of pistol caliber carbines, or PDWs. And of course, there is a difference depending on who you ask. So I'm gonna go ahead and link a Brass Facts video up here at the top of the screen, because he deep dives into the differences of PDWs, or personal defense weapons, and pistol caliber carbines, and what would constitute a PDW over a PCC. So check that out if you're interested, because he does a very good job of breaking it down. And I consider this to be a PDW, even though by his definition, I believe it's a pistol caliber carbine, but I look at it as a PDW because it fits in a standard size backpack. It's still used as a pistol caliber cartridge. It's lightweight, it's easy to carry around, and it just serves that purpose for me. Now, I am going to tell you a pro of this particular platform that I haven't really heard discussed many other places that I want you to be aware of, because I think it's important, especially in regards to what these would be used for. And of course, they're used in a few different capacities for civilians. One would be in an emergency situation where you don't have enough with your concealed carry pistol and you have this with you and you need a little bit more capability, of course. But I think the other one that we talk about quite a bit here in this community is during a societal collapse or SHTF type situation where rifles haven't really come out yet, but things are inherently more dangerous, and you want access to a more capable weapon system without having to change everything about what you do. So, in that regard, I've got an interesting pro for you, but first let's talk about the more obvious ones. The most obvious one is size and form factor and weight, right? These are generally lighter weight, smaller, and can fit in things like standard size backpacks. Now, this particular setup here with the Beretta PMXs with a primary arms SLX MD25 red dot and a Enforce WML Gen 3, because Gen 2 didn't work out too well, and a sling, of course, not to mention a tail hook brace, because this is a pistol. This weighs 7 pounds 11 ounces. So is it lightweight? Like, sure, but not super lightweight. And that is with a fully loaded magazine as well, just so you're aware. But it's still lighter than my fighting rifle. The magazines are also not necessarily lightweight. A fully loaded 30-round magazine for this gun, this is 9mm 124 grain NATO, weighs 3 pounds 3 ounces for 3 of them, okay? And why did I do 3 magazines? Because it's kind of like the standard I would expect to have with me if I was carrying this around. So 3 pounds, 3 ounces, or obviously 1 pound, 1 ounce per magazine, isn't necessarily light, but they are very thin and small, and I can carry 3 of these in the front pocket of my pants. So that's something I can't do with a PMag. Now let's compare this particular system to my fighting rifle, which is a BCM Recce 16. Fully set up without a suppressor, that rifle weighs 8 pounds, 11 ounces. And 3 PMags loaded up with 5.56 M193 is 3 pounds, 2 ounces, technically lighter than these 3 magazines of 9mm with 124 grain projectiles. About the same though, right? So this weighs 1 pound less than my rifle and the magazines weigh the same. So it's not much lighter, but it is much smaller and much more compact, and I can carry a bunch of these magazines in my pocket, which is a lot more difficult to achieve with PMags or AR-15 style magazines. So yes, it is lighter weight, not by a lot though, and of course you can go much lighter depending on what you choose. If you went with a Flux Raider or something along those lines, it would be much lighter and much smaller, but I find that this gives me a little bit more capability and a little bit more stability when shooting, not to mention the controls are easier and everything else related to that as well. So trade-offs, of course, but that's the most obvious one. Mobility, okay? And I just wanted to make those comparisons for you so you wouldn't be taken back or surprised by the fact that it's not that much lighter than your standard rifle, and it's not that much lighter than the other ammunition you might be using, but it's just the form factor that really lends its hand to being able to be carried around in a backpack hours on end without it impeding you too much, okay? Now, another benefit of this particular platform, PDW or PCC or whatever we're calling it at this point, is going to be the fact that it uses the same ammo as your concealed carry weapon. So today, not so much because this is a USP 45, but in general, if I'm carrying my Glock 45 and 9mm, well, this is just more ammo for that gun as well. Now, why does that matter? Well, of course, if you run out of ammo in your pistol and you have this with you, I mean, you're probably just gonna switch. But the idea is that we just don't know what's gonna happen. So more ammo is better, and if you have to stick with your CCW, but maybe you did have to let some rounds out, well, you can top off your magazines now because you have extra with you that was meant to be fed into this. Not to mention, your CCW, during times where this would be in a backpack, is still your primary weapon system. Why is that? Because it's easily accessible and it'd be the first thing you would pull out. In order to get into my backpack, pull this out and load it and everything else, it's gonna take me a little bit of time. I mean, it's not a slow process, but it would require maybe ducking down behind cover or getting behind a wall or something like that, pulling everything out, making sure it's loaded and ready to go. Now, you can do drills and get very fast at that, but even then, that's not gonna be as quick as just pulling a pistol out. So your pistol is your primary. And this remains covert in your backpack during that time, and that allows it to remain covert versus a rifle, which in general, you're either going to be carrying, so now you're not covert at all, and now you have a weapon that's out and about and letting everybody know that you're armed, or it's in a bag or something that's more specifically designed for it, which could give you away a little bit easier. So this obviously provides you a little bit of additional, let's just say, coverage when it comes to not letting everybody know you're armed with something more than a handgun. And of course, hopefully if you're concealed carrying and this is in a backpack, no one knows you're armed at all. And of course, the other thing is that it is lower recoil because it is that same ammunition as your primary, which means that you're gonna have easier follow-up shots. It's gonna be much easier to get on target. And it's very easy to just, well, shoot this gun because, well, there's no recoil, right? So all those things are also pros in the sense of it using the same ammo as your primary weapon system or your CCW. Now, here's the one that I don't think people discuss very often that I wanted to bring to your attention as a concept worth considering, especially regarding the Beretta PMXs because it fits this very well regarding affordability, okay? This gun, in many ways, should be looked at as being disposable. Now, I say that because in these uncertain scenarios where something like this would actually be useful, you might be walking around with your backpack with this inside. You might be finding yourself going through somewhere more dangerous, which is why you decided you needed it. You might find yourself in a collapse type scenario where things are unpredictable and the environment's more hostile and you just don't know what you're going to encounter. And in many circumstances, you might find yourself in a situation where you don't want to actually either be armed or be obviously armed by having something like a backpack or whatever it may be. Or you need to use this momentarily in a temporary situation to solve a problem, and then you need to flee and get away and not be recognized as a person who may or may not have a weapon of this nature in order to avoid any type of apprehension. So these should be looked at least in my opinion, as being somewhat disposable. Which is why I don't have a laser aiming module, I don't have a suppressor, I don't have anything overly expensive. We have a primary arms red dot that's just like a mid-tier in the sense of price. We have an Enforce light, which is mid-tier in the sense of price. Nothing on here super expensive, because I might have to get rid of it, and I don't necessarily need the things on here to be super expensive, because this is a stopgap. This is to get me out of a bad situation, but not to go to war with, and not to fight a alien invasion or destroy a cabal of reptiles that may or may not be in control of things we don't like. And at the end of the day, this is just a emergency tool, like a fire extinguisher. We don't worry about our fire extinguishers being disposable or not. We use them and then we just deal with the aftermath thereafter, right? And that's kind of what I think was missing from this concept that really made me believe more in it, okay? First off, this whole setup is in a budget framework. This gun is relatively affordable. We'll talk about that here in a second, because I'm going to tell you some things about the Beretta PMXs, which I think is, worth considering, because it has been a very good gun for me. But everything on it's inexpensive. I already told you how all the accessories are affordable, right? And then, not to mention, if I do have to ditch this, I got to throw my backpack in a ditch, or I got to throw this in a trash can, or whatever it is, it's not my go-to-war weapon that I'm getting rid of. I'm not losing like the most important weapon in my arsenal in the process. I'm losing something that just, has a good purpose, but isn't necessarily gonna be life-changing to suddenly not have anymore, right? So another thing to consider, and that's why, like I said, I don't put $1,800 weapon-mounted lights or anything like, or weapon-mounted lights, laser aiming modules on this. If you have an $1,800 weapon-mounted light, you may have been scammed by somebody, but regardless, that's why I took a budget approach to this build, because that makes more sense to me in the sense of being able to toss it without regret. And the other thing is that these guns, when they're purpose built, which is something else I would want to consider about a pistol caliber carbine or a PDW, when they're purpose built, they're reliable. And that's why I like this gun, because it's not a chassis that something else is shoved into, and it's not a gun that's based off of something else that works well but doesn't necessarily work right when it's forced into a different configuration. Like there's a lot of AR-9s out there that are very finicky. I think they're cool, and I like the idea of having the same manual of arms and everything else, but they're just not purpose built to work properly with 9mm, and they can have more issues. Whereas this is purpose built, and it's affordable because it was built relatively cheaply based on its predecessing design, and it works even though it's not super expensive. So that's kind of the big pro for me, is that I have a disposable weapon system. And yeah, I know that might sound crazy to some people, and it might sound, out of control for those of you who are on a really tight budget, but in comparison to other things that I own, and in comparison to other weapons platforms and systems out there, this is, for the most part, cheap. It's not built cheap, it runs great, but it's a cheap system overall, which means I wouldn't necessarily have to hesitate about getting rid of it suddenly in an emergency, right? So that is the pros conversation, and I guess the reason my mind changed about pistol caliber carbines in general, and some of the things that I just wanted to bring to your attention, because at first I really was just like, man, why wouldn't I just have a 300 blackout and some 30 round mags and have it fully set up and kitted out and ready to go if I really have to pull something like this out anyway, right? But hopefully everything I just went over gives you some things to consider that maybe you just hadn't thought about before, which is where I was at a certain point in time as well. Like I said, I can fit 3 of these in my pocket. Not so easy with my AR, and I can fit way more in my backpack or in a chest rig or whatever else I might want to use them for. And that form factor really does just kind of change the equation of what you're capable of doing without having to be fully kitted out or having a chest rig or anything else in the process, right? So let's talk about this gun itself, because not only did Beretta, send it to the channel for testing and evaluation, but I do think it has some interesting concepts behind it that I want to share with you that might be worth considering because of its price point. This is not an expensive firearm in comparison to the other competition in its class. However, there are a couple things about it that I don't like that I want to make sure you're aware of as well. All right, so here we have the Beretta PMXs. We'll go ahead and clear it, make sure we're good to go there, okay? You can see there's nothing in the chamber. So everything's all set. Now, let's talk about the gun just in the context of what it is and why it's probably worth investigating. First off, you can find these between like 800 and 1,000. Like that's crazy talk for how reliable and how good the gun has been for me and for what is in its competition class regarding things like the B&T TP9 and stuff like that. Like, this is very affordable, and interestingly enough, it's actually built off of those older designs. This is built with the concept of the Tech 9, which is old school, and then B&T kind of revitalized it with the P26, and then Beretta acquired the licensing and re-released it as the PMXs with some improvements. So this gun is well vetted in the sense of historical design origin, and it is very reliable and very simplistic, which is why it's affordable but still reliable. Okay, so now when folded, this gun, if I can remember how to fold things on camera, there we go. Folded up, this gun is about 17 inches long. So 17 inches is just short enough to fit inside of a backpack while maintaining a relatively low profile. So I find that to be very beneficial. Of course, it is threaded on the barrel, which is about 7 inches long. It's 6.9 inches technically, but it's threaded, so you could technically run a suppressor and stuff like that as well. But in general, you know, without any of that going on, we've got a 17-inch overall length on this firearm, which is a pistol, which allows you to really stow it easily in just about any standard size backpack, okay? Now, the other thing that's good about this particular gun is that it's ambidextrous. So we have the charging handle here on the bolt, which you can see. This is just a reciprocating charging handle. It reciprocates with the bolt. That's why this thing is just so, you know, basic. But what's nice is that this is just a big, fat, chunky bolt, which is just straight blowback, which is why it works so well and why it shoots so well. Now, on the other side, you can see that the bolt is actually threaded here in order to accommodate that charging handle in case you want to swap it over to be more ambidextrous. So it has that option. You have a magazine release here on this side as well as on this side right here. And then the only thing that's not ambidextrous is the bolt catch, which is right here. And that's unfortunate, but it is what it is because, you know, I guess you don't really need it because you can just charge the charging handle. This thing has worked very well. I mean, it's honestly been 100% reliable. And I'm not just saying that because Beretta sent it to the channel. I mean, it legitimately has been, even in extreme cold weather. I live in North Dakota, and I test a lot of these guns out in negative temperatures just to see how they'll run, especially these polymer-based guns, which this gun is mostly polymer, and zero issues at all. So I'm really impressed with the gun. I really don't have anything negative to say about it in regards to reliability, but there are some things I don't necessarily like about it that I want to discuss. And I do want to say that it does have sling attachment points, but they're like HK style hook attachments. So you'll need HK style hooks in order to put a sling on here, or you can just use the pick rail to attach whatever you want, of course. And if you do want to put a brace or any type of folding adapter on the back, you'll need to get a Picatinny adapter for the rear of the receiver because it comes with just something that has like a QD sling swivel attachment on it. Now, let's talk about what I don't like about the gun, okay? First off, the bolt catch placement itself. This bolt catch isn't necessarily a problem, but if you were to hold the gun in front of the mag well, like a lot of people might feel comfortable with, you can see there my hand starts to push on the bolt catch. And what happens in that situation is that you don't get your bolt hold open on last round, so you don't necessarily know your magazine's empty, and then you get the fatal click, right? So that's an issue. It's not huge, but I just move my grip up here to the front and it works very well for that, and it doesn't touch or interact with the bolt catch at all then. But that's just something that I wish was moved or in a different position in order to avoid that particular scenario where your hand interacts with it unintentionally, okay? Now, another thing that I didn't like about this gun that I think needs to be addressed is that it has Picatinny rails from the factory on the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock of the front of the handguard, okay? But mine doesn't. And I wanted them gone because I hold the gun like so, and they were kind of in the way and too bulky. And I wanted to slim it up a little bit and make it a little bit smoother, and this is much better for my grip. However, these things did not come off the way you would have expected them to. They have screws, and you would think you just unscrew them and the Picatinny rails come off. That's not what happened. I unscrewed them, the screws stripped, everything kind of started to fall apart and didn't work, yet the rails were loose enough to rattle, but they weren't loose enough to come off. It was a whole nightmare, and basically what I ended up having to do was I used a hacksaw and just chopped right through the screws, right down the line of the handguard here, and just fully removed them that way. But it did take using that additional tool and that hacksaw to get those rails off, and obviously that's not not what I would have liked to had to do, but it is something that worked, and now I'm good to go with this, but I can pretty much never put those rails back on, and it was also something that shouldn't have had to be required. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that, because that is a slight issue, but if you like the rails or you plan on using them, then it doesn't matter at all. But I wanted them gone, and making them gone was indeed a process, okay? And now the only other thing I don't like about the gun, and these aren't things that are deal breakers by any means, because it's been a very good gun, but I'm always going to give you my honest opinion and just point things out, so that way if you're making any type of decision related to this firearm, you have all the information. The ambidextrous safety, it works great on the strong side, but on the other side, it's the same size. And the unfortunate side effect of that is that it actually interacts with your trigger finger or with your grip when safety is turned off. Like, we've already checked this gun, it's empty, so we're gonna turn the safety off, and now you can see that when that lever actually drops down into that position, it touches my hand until I go to pull the trigger. And yes, that's not really a big issue, and it hasn't stopped me from being able to manipulate the gun or shoot it or pull the trigger or anything like that, but it's just a little uncomfortable and I don't like it. So I think that either making this smaller or more low profile and then being able to swap which side had the more low profile safety would be a good idea, but it's just kind of an annoyance more than anything. I just wish there was a different way around that. So that is the, I guess, up close and personal information about the PMXs, because of how budget friendly this particular firearm is and how it fulfills the role of that PDW or PCC concept. I think it's definitely worth considering. And I do want to thank Beretta for sending this out to the channel. They don't have any expectations with anything when they send me stuff. They just want me to check it out and give them feedback. And then obviously if I post about it, it's beneficial for them, but I do appreciate them doing that. There's no exchange of money or anything like that. They just provided product that I requested specifically for video concepts like this one, and this is why it's in my possession now. So try to be transparent with you guys as best I can. Now that you know about the gun and the things I like about it, and I'm not gonna take it apart or show you the internals or anything, it's literally a Tech 9, just a giant fat bolt that's straight blowback and just works the way it's supposed to. There's not much to really talk about. It's very easy to maintain and keep clean and everything else. But at the end of the day, I will say the trigger is actually pretty good, very like crisp and very, you know, user-friendly. So let's talk about, you know, my overall thoughts and kind of conclude this video with like a little bit of a discussion regarding, you know, why I think this is an important concept to have for anybody who's worried about preparedness. All right, now you know about the gun, now you know why I've changed my mind about pistol caliber carbines, and I just want to end this out with reminding you that every tool in your inventory has a specific use case. And in this certain use case scenario that we're discussing here today with PDWs or PCCs, there's not many other things that fulfill that role very well. This is for that interim period of time where things are becoming more hostile or more dangerous, or you just need to have something a little bit more capable with you because your pistol wouldn't necessarily get you through. And these situations could include things like mob violence or foreign intervention or who knows what else, where a handgun might not cut it, but a rifle will make you a target. So I think having at least one pistol caliber carbine or PDW in your inventory is a good idea. Not to mention, they're very fun to train with. The ammo is less expensive. You can teach people who are more sensitive to recoil with these firearms. There's a lot of other benefits too, but I wanted to keep the conversation more around the actual conceptual use of these guns rather than just talking about it as a particular platform. So anything else you need from me, I'll go to magicprepper.com. Of course, I do want to always mention that the MP Field tool is currently for sale, and it is available at magicprepper.com. And this is something that's made in the USA, designed by me, and something I'm very proud of, and I think you will like if you enjoy using rifles or you get out and actually shoot your guns. And the other thing to keep in mind is that I would love to hear your feedback in the comments below, because honestly, I could be wrong about some of this. I'm not a professional. I don't have a law enforcement background. I'm not ex-military or anything along those lines. I am just somebody who uses this stuff to the best of my ability and tries to get my thoughts together about it regarding, you know, research and other ideas that are out there, thanks to other people who are sharing that information that have more experience than I do. And the other thing I want to mention is that if you're a fan of the channel or you enjoy this type of content, make sure you hit the subscribe button or check that you are subscribed, because sometimes that also falls apart. Anything else you need from me at all, you know what to do. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.